Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm State Representative Dan Mao of the 91st Legislative District in Adams County. Several weeks ago, when the Senate passed legislation to fund the budget through tax hikes and reckless borrowing, House leadership challenged the members of our caucus to come up with viable alternatives. For most of the summer, a group of 18 rank and file members took up the challenge, and we are here today to roll out our findings and share with you what we are calling the taxpayer's budget. Before I begin, I would like to mention the names of other members who have played key roles in bringing us to this day. They are Dawn Kiefer, Chris Dush, Joe Emmerich, Mike Tobash, Frank Ryan, Ryan McKenzie, Kristen Phillips Hill, Seth Grove, Greg Rothman, Keith Gillespie, Kate Klunk, Dave Zimmerman, Will Tallman, Steve Bloom, Paul Schemmel, Eric Nelson, Russ Diamond, and I would also like to recognize that Senator Scott Wagner is also in the audience here today. I'm sure in full support of what we're doing. The taxpayer's budget is the result of our in-depth examination of the state budget, which uncovered taxpayer dollars already paid in, but sitting idle in special government accounts that have inordinately high reserve balances. Some accounts appear to be dormant, having been untouched for several years. Accessing these budget accounts has been done before. Thanks to the new Treasury Transparency Portal, House Appropriations Committee staff, House legal staff, and the governor's own budget documents, our group has performed its due diligence in vetting each revenue source. We have concluded that there are adequate resources located in these special funds to help balance this year's budget. We have provided you with copies of documents we examined to arrive at our final product and this conclusion. Until and unless every source of reserve revenue is exhausted, we should not and are not asking more of our taxpayers. We are simply doing what we should be doing, serving as good stewards of their hard-earned tax dollars. The taxpayer's budget should not cost one job, compromise one service, or close one agency. It does not call for major tax increase or to borrow $1. At this time, I'd like to ask Representative Joe Emmerich. He will provide more detail about the taxpayer's budget. Joe?
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. Thank you, Dan. I am State Representative Joe Emmerich. I serve the 137th District in Northampton County. It's been an incredible honor and pleasure to be part of this team for the last 6+ weeks as we have worked diligently to resolve the budget issue that's before us. So as you know, the 2016-17 budget had an overspend of approximately $1.5 billion. In addition, the current year's budget sits at approximately $600 million underfunded for a total of nearly $2.2 billion, which we are trying to close. Since July 21st, the focus and purpose of this team has been to stand in defense of the taxpayer. Today, we are unveiling a $2.462 billion revenue proposal to close out the 2016-17 budget and fully fund the 2017-18 budget without borrowing or raising taxes. As Representative Mao mentioned, we have scoured for the last 6 weeks special or restricted funds. And the first part of that $2.4 billion revenue stream, we are accessing $1.2 billion of surplus tax money, already paid by the taxpayers over the years. Funds that have been held in what is effectively known as a shadow budget. Out of these 218 special or restricted funds, there are more than 400 different accounts, holding, when this process started, just over $12 billion worth of revenue. Of the 218 funds and accounts that exist, we have only accessed 41 of those. 34 of these accounts, of which we are rededicating taxpayer monies, have either been used in the past for this exact same purpose, and thus there is past precedent for what we are doing, and/or these funds were already approved by our House leadership team and appropriations staff. In addition, 5 other accounts are dormant, which have had little to no activity over the last 3 years. As this team has reviewed every one of these 400+ accounts, we did so diligently with a very strict set of criteria, demonstrating no favoritism as to what funds we took or did not take revenues from. The 5 criteria that we used were: number 1, that the money we would rededicate would have no impact on the operations of those funds. 2, that there were no legal or other restrictions to those funds, which would prohibit us from taking that money. 3, the revenues into these funds more than support the expenses that they distribute each year. 4, that the funds would have historically high fund balances that were taxpayer dollars paid into them. This included an extensive minimum 3-year look back at each one of these funds. And 5, that there were no matching funds attached, which would prohibit us from taking. The $1.2 billion pool of surplus tax dollars, plus an additional $400 million we have identified in lapsed funds from prior years, will close out the $1.5 billion deficit from 16-17 and also begin to pay the 17-18 remaining $600 million. Again, our entire proposal, which I see the media has the full list of, contains $2.462 billion. And again, I cannot say 7 years I've been here, this is the best group of people I've had the chance to work with. This is an awesome team who is persistent, dedicated, and it's an honor for me to serve with you guys. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to turn it over to Representative Paul Schemmel and Dawn Kiefer.
So we won't take up too much more of your time, but we wanted to just summarize this and close this out and what the intent of our group was. The bottom line is we're standing up for the taxpayers. We put a lot of work into this effort. We scoured these accounts, surpluses, as well as their end fund balances, and everyone in this group has been committed to closing out the 16-17 budget as well as balancing the 17-18 budget without tapping into the taxpayer's wallet one more time. And in the past 4 years, we've asked taxpayers to pay more in gas, property taxes, and now, as of last week, they're paying $1 more for the bottle of Jim Beam. We're not about to ask them to do that one more time. We've worked for about 7 weeks now on a solution that will utilize existing resources and close out the budget and balance next year's budget without taxing, bonding, or borrowing, and this plan does that. While leaving all of the programs intact, they will continue to receive their same operating dollars. While we've been hearing from a lot of different agencies and interest groups protecting program dollars, our interest is really in protecting the taxpayers' dollars. So we're going to open this up to questions about the plan.
Did the governor sign off on taking $357 million from the Public Transportation Trust Fund and $120 million from the Multimodal Transportation Fund? And can you explain the legality of that?
So the governor go ahead.
Yeah, so far the governor has, this has been a project of the men and women that you see before you, working with the appropriations staff from the House of Representatives. We will expect certainly input from the governor's office and the Senate, but we are utilizing data that is given to us largely from the Department of the Treasury and also the governor's office in his own budget book I'm sure in time we will hear from the governor, but why wouldn't the governor and the Senate approve of the utilization of funds that we already have under our feet? In terms of the legality, actually there are many times in the past the legislature and the governor's office have taken funds from nearly all of these accounts. We believe that we've accounted for that. We've accounted for the commitments. Once again, we're working off of the best information that we have access to, both from the governor's office and the Department of Treasury.
But specifically, I mean, these are transportation-related funds, so can you explain the legality of taking that? Is that allowed under the law?
We believe that it is allowed to take the funds that we are proposing to take. There are funds that are restricted, but we believe that the funds that we're proposing to take are without restrictions. Yes?
Do you have the support of leadership, and do you have the support of do you think you have enough votes in the House?
We absolutely have the support of leadership. In addition to the votes of the individuals you see on the stage and the others that have been assisting us in this, we have the votes of all 8 members of the Republican leadership of the House. We've been very actively working with other individuals within the House. We're still in the process of trying to personally touch each member of the House of Representatives, both Republican and Democrat. We believe that there will be a significant amount of support for this.
Is any of the money in the multimodal transportation fund earmarked for any specific project, or is this just all group money that's waiting there to be?
Sure. All funds have earmarked, or earmarked is not the correct word. All funds, there are 218 separate funds, over 400 separate accounts amongst those funds. And there's certainly going to be commitments within there. Those commitments are reported in the governor in the Department of Treasury's own documents. We've attempted to account for those in the proposal that we have.
The mentions here 28.3 million reduction of tax credits, except for 2. Those tax credits are years out. How do you account for that if somebody is looking for, is using that tax credit in future years, including this year?
So currently, they can account for this year's tax credits. In future years, that's all vetted out in that 28.5 number that you see on that sheet. So that's taken out. And this year it would only yield 28.5. Taking that into account, next year you would be looking at an increase. Actually, you would be up to about $60 million there.
So this money is not earmarked by somebody looking to use those tax credits. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. It would reduce the tax credits that would be available.
So that money's not, some business somewhere or somebody else is not going to use that money, or are you just taking it from them, is my question.
It would be a reduction in the amount going forward. Keep in mind, as Representative Emmerich had said earlier, the proposal that we have does not result or should not impact the ongoing operations of any of the agencies. All commitments are general commitments or obligations of state would have to be honored. So it does not impact any commitments the state would have, to the best of the knowledge that we have, based upon the information that we have been working with from both the Treasury and the governor's office.
Which are the 5 funds you're claiming are dormant?
So I don't have them completely broken down, but I believe the energy fund is one of them that is dormant. It has not, there hasn't been anything other than possibility of interest going into that account. Might be the only revenue stream that they have coming in there. State school, I believe, is another one. State school fund is another one that's a dormant account. On this sheet, I don't have, I can get you that information.
We can get a full
and I believe
list
it's
of
on
that
there.
rather than.
But there's 4 or 5 accounts that are there that are dormant accounts.
Would you answer a skeptic and a Senate staffer that says, we've had people in the budget for 30 years. Do you think if there were $2.4 billion sitting there, we wouldn't have found it? How do you just in general answer that? You may have heard that, by the way, but how would you answer that?
In July, when the leader of the House Republicans, when we broke after our last session, he committed all of us to bring forth the ideas we have. Nothing we're bringing forth is a new idea. We've actually tapped out of these funds multiple times in the past. I guess what's different this time is that we're doing a little more circumspectly. You already heard the criteria that Representative Emmerich went down, so we tried to be, have no favorites as we did this. It's a matter of political will, I think, to do this, and also an effort to bring out of the shadows and into the light of day a lot of appropriations that have been, passing directly through state agencies, not run through the appropriations process. This has been an effort actually of many within the House, and I think the Senate as well, for some time. So it's a good time. There's no time is a bad time to bring in reforms. This not only is an opportunity to fill a budget gap, but also to bring some really much needed reforms. Yes, ma'am.
You did say in your myths versus facts sheet that it's a myth that this could only be done at the beginning of the budget process, and you did touch on that a little bit, but why wasn't this done sooner?
Once again, we can only answer questions for ourselves. We're a group of rank and file members that have been working to fill a gap in the budget. Sometimes it takes time to go through options that may or may not succeed or fail before you can arrive at one that everyone has the political will to do. And that's where we are now. We think we found a very reasonable solution. Yes.
Is this a one-time sweep of funds, or is there any actual redirection of, tax monies that are allocated for this fund?
Sure. Yes and yes. So recount the fact that about 2/3 of the gap that we're trying to fill is a one-time debt. So filling it with one-time money is not unreasonable. In fact, if you were to use tax money to fill a one-time debt, you'd end up with excess funds that you didn't necessarily intend to have to begin with. So if we are taking from funds that are dormant or funds that are underutilized, that is a one-time taking of those funds. However, in time, and we are also funding the general appropriation of the state using these funds. Those appropriations go forward. It does not change any of the appropriations that were already made in the spending plan passed in late June. So as you're taking, in one sense, you're also providing, you're funding the budget to move those things forward. And once again, I don't want to stress too much that it's bringing online or into the light of day a lot of appropriations that have over time sort of moved their way off of the budget books. So this is also a government reform, just happens to be a very convenient time to do it.
Representative, you mentioned the legality, you think it's okay to do it, but the JUA, there's a federal lawsuit over the JUA, and that precluded the state from taking the money last year because there was a freeze on that. Can you talk about the legality of that? There's a lawsuit on that.
We're well aware of the lawsuit. We've certainly reviewed these with the benefit of counsel and attorneys who are on the field of individuals that you see standing here before you. We believe that all of the funds that we propose are accessible, once again, based upon the information that we have from the governor's office and the Department of Treasury. Yes?
What is the state school fund? Is that for any school in the state, or is that for state-run schools like the Scotland School for Veterans Children used to?
Scotland School for Veterans Children no longer exists. It was closed several years ago.
So what is the fund for?
I'll have to pull up that one. So the state's school fund is not for that. It is. So this was to provide temporary aid to schools, to promote education and conservation of natural resources, forestry, agriculture, industrial pursuits. And it was a temporary aid mechanism that's been there. For the past 3 years, it's been dormant. There's a nominal amount of funds that are in that account, and there have been the only revenue coming into the account has been interest on the funds that remain there, and there have been no distributions on that account. Something that's not used.
Could you highlight some of the funds where, from this point forward, you would be taking a stream of funding that would be going for whatever purpose, farmland preservation or transportation projects, and you're actually turning that stream toward the general fund? If I understand you correctly, you said that there is a component of that, right? What are some of the redirections?
Okay, so the plan we currently have does not include any redirects in our final plan. That's correct, right? Okay, so we don't have any in there. We are looking at those in the future, but because we could not we had requested some additional information and we did not have access to, so we did not include that final number into our proposal.
So all the funding streams for these special funds are left intact then?
Yes, the money's coming in, the same monies that are going in currently will be the same ones that come out.
And that was one of the conditions
It does include it? I'm sorry, I couldn't find you up there, I'm sorry.
one of the conditions, as Representative Emmerich says, we would not impact operations.
That's on this one. I apologize, it is in there. I did not see that number. one right here. Is that a final number that's in there? Why didn't you-
Free cash access.
Okay, so that's 100 million. Okay, so that's, I'm sorry, I was incorrect there. We had that narrowed down. It was $100 million in redirects. And that's an aggregate number that we have there, is what we were initially working with. And that was the amount of money that was overfunded in different accounts. So it was looking at the funds collectively, the ones that had continual increases in their fund balances at the end of the year. So they were receiving more revenues than they actually had in disbursements out of those accounts. So on an aggregate level, we took those funds there, so that's a redirect. We don't have a breakdown of that currently.
Material up there, but do you have a summary of the total amount in each fund and how you got either specific transfer amount for each fund? Is that it? I don't know what that is up there, if that's a printout or some sort.
So that up there, that is a list of all of the special funds that exist. It'll show you what their current fund balance is as of June 30th in their 999 account, as well as their reserve account, which is 998 account. And that can show you, that gives you a kind of an idea of the history of the account. Also in the governor's budget, it shows you incomes in and disbursements. So it will show you the revenues and the disbursements. We used, again, the criteria that Joe outlined to identify the 41 accounts that we were making one-time transfers from. And those were ones that had excess surplus dollars at the end of the year, either in the reserve or fund balance on a consistent level.
There's a question in the back.
I think you just kind of answered this one, actually. I was just going to say about the reserve funds. We've been talking a lot about how high the reserve funds are, and I just wanted to clarify if it was just kind of a matter of opinion or what your system for kind of deciding that was. I mean, if you asked the folks at Coal Land Improvements, they probably wouldn't say their reserve is too high. This came down to the math of Washington's disbursements year to year.
Right. So we would, where it was available in the Treasury's reports, we would see what their lowest that some of these accounts had ever gotten to. Multimodal, for example, was never below a certain amount of money, and we made sure in those circumstances where that was available that we didn't take them below that number, knowing that taking into account for their commitments and their annual revenues and disbursements.
Does this doesn't include liquor privatization or any of those other talking points from the caucus? It's strictly what you're talking. You're not going there, not looking to do that?
It's not part of this plan.
That's correct. Very well. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so, sorry, yes.
So, I mean, there is a lot of revenue here that's one time, and I think we've heard before in budget negotiations that there does need to be some amount of recurring revenue. Usually that's put around $700 million, often more. I mean, is that not a concern?
That is a concern, and some of the proposals that you'll see within there actually do generate recurring revenue as well. But looking at the bulk of this, about 2/3 of the hole we're trying to fill is a one-time debt. So one-time, we want to, can't say that more clearly. One-time revenue for one-time debt is very reasonable. There are recurring revenues that are within the proposals too, especially when you look at the tax credits. And once again, budgeting is an annual process. So each year, the legislature and the governor working together can arrive at budget numbers that suit the needs and also revenue streams for future budget needs. So we believe that this covers this year and it provides opportunities for next year as well.
How much recurring revenue is in here?
I don't have those numbers offhand.
It's marked on their sheet.
Okay.
It's marked on your sheet.
So
Yes.
that's just the start numbers.
Correct.
Yes.
The $400 million lapses, what's the universe of lapses that are out there that you pull $400 million from?
So some is short term, some is longer term. I believe in total, at the last report we had, there was somewhere around 1.6 billion total in unlapsed funds that were there. We believe accessible, the funds that would be easily accessible, unlapsed funds, was 400 million that's in there currently. That's the end of the year. It's a comprehensive report that was pulled off. You can pull it off of Treasury's website for that.
So, along the lines of a couple other questions here. It's now September 5th, excuse me. Why wasn't this done in April when you guys passed your last budget? We need 253 lawmakers for if you guys were able to do this.
Once again, we can only answer for ourselves. We're a group of rank and file members that have come up with a solution to a problem. It's never too late to solve a problem, and I think that answers the question. Yes?
Well, and while this is a eureka moment for everybody on the stage, the fact is to get a budget through, you gotta get it past the Senate, and the governor has to agree with it. We're 2 months late on the budget, moving on 3 months late on the budget, and the governor said, I think today, that as of next Friday, there's some bad things happening financially if we don't have, where do you think this is going from here? I mean, is this it? You solved the problem, everybody, nothing to see here?
All the more reason to solve the problem quickly. We think we have a reasonable proposal that fills the gap, and we know that at least the House will be back in session next week. We look forward to hopefully movement at that time. Yes, ma'am.
It seemed like one of the driving forces behind a lot of this budget talk has been the downgrade of our credit rating. And so this, proposes a lot of one-time revenue to deal with one-time debt and all that, but also to help fund our general fund. So I mean, is there any concern at all about what the impact of this on our credit rating?
We do not believe that this will impact our credit rating adversely. Doing nothing will impact our credit rating adversely. This will have no effect, no negative effect.
Thank you guys very much.